People of Reddit, what's the scariest thing that's ever happened to you? 3 months ago I went to the doctor for bloating and constipation. The symptoms had been coming and going over the previous 2 months and then finally getting progressively worse in the last couple weeks. One CT scan later, I learned I have advanced ovarian cancer. Terrifying statistics regarding prognosis. Living with gratitude every day that I have access to excellent care and tons of loving support from family, friends, and neighbors. When I was 12 or so, my family went camping at a campground in the Shenandoah Valley. Not the middle of nowhere but kind of an isolated mountain town. I went to take our dog for a walk out on a trail at the edge of the campground with some pretty dense woods all around. My dog suddenly froze and wouldn't budge. Right as I heard some rustling in the woods behind me, I spun around to see some random, middle-aged guy emerge from the trees and begin to approach me. I was too surprised to really react, and my dog was super old at that point so he didn't do much other than freeze. Then the guy goes, "Hey, this is going to seem like a weird question, but could you come back to my cabin and help me cut my hair? I can't see the back of my neck and could really use your help." I quickly said something like, "No sorry, my parents are waiting on me for dinner so I should get going." He just shrugged and walked back into the woods. I made it back to our campsite safely and told my parents. I had thought maybe he was a campground employee, but only after my parents' reaction did I realize how weird the interaction was. They immediately went to the campground staff and told them what happened. They searched the campground but never found the guy. I still get goosebumps thinking about it. That's creepy as heck, but just imagine if that was a genuine offer. Might as well ask. No crap, they ran off, Jim. That's creepy as frick. My wife was 30 plus weeks pregnant when her stomach began to hurt to the point she really couldn't talk. It was extremely intense pain. The hospital, one of the best in the world, had a difficult time figuring out what it was so they sent her down to imaging. By the time she came back to the room, they realized my wife and the baby were really starting to struggle. They did an emergency C-section and realized most of my wife's intestines were black and dead. It ended up being intestinal malrotation. My wife was apparently born with her intestines not fully anchored and supported so they were more prone to twist. We had no idea. Our baby passed away and my wife almost did. That was scary. Still is. Especially if she gets a stomachache, it's difficult not to think of the worst case scenario. Also, losing a child is scary, so I guess I got 2 for this question. Yay me. I'm so sorry for your loss. I worked at a credit union and got robbed. He jumped the counter and robbed me first, then the other 3 people working. Scariest 50 seconds of my life. Was already on the worst date of my life with a barely coherent guy who smelled like he hadn't showered in a week. I was dropping him off at his bike after a glass of wine at a fancy wine bar where he knew a guy who wasn't working that night. So guess who has 2 thumbs and paid for both drinks? This guy. Suddenly dude yells, "Look out," and I slammed the brakes. I missed getting demolished by inches by speeding SUV blasting through a stop sign and across an arterial road at 70 plus mph. I later found out that it crashed into someone's house shortly thereafter. Anyways, I was shaking like a leaf after that. That guy saved both our lives. Wish I could say it was a meet cute, but I never saw him again. Real quick, from him being a douche to we'll call it even and have a good life. I was in bed when I heard a rustle. Looked around. Saw nothing. Lay back down. Heard a louder rustle. Looked around. Looked under the bed. Lay back down with my heart in my throat. Something large landed on my face and chest. It was a stupid poster over my bed. To this day I'm proud I didn't soil myself. This has happened to me as well. Except I opened my eyes when I heard the rustle to see Wonder Woman's face rapidly floating down to mine. Equally scared shitless and confusingly aroused in my half-awake state. LOL. Getting hit by a car at 45 miles per hour and I was on a push bike, no helmet or anything, and had a head-on collision with it. Massive head and brain injury. Died once. Brought back and here I am. The lesson is, always wear a helmet when on a bike. My wife hemorrhaging blood while pregnant with our daughter, not knowing for over an hour if either one would make it. My wife did after 2 blood transfusions. Our daughter did not. Thank you all. Your kind words genuinely do mean a lot. I was snorkeling on the outside of an intercoastal in South Florida. I had no real experience doing it before. There's a big wall of rocks separating the area we were snorkeling and jet skiing in from ships and boats entering and exiting the intercoastal. We climbed up on the rocks for fun and I had to take off my flippers to do so. I jumped into the intercoastal area and without my flippers on, I was instantly sucked out into the middle of the intercoastal as a cruise ship was coming through. The details about how close I was to getting hit and exactly how much danger I was in are a bit blurry, but I absolutely thought to myself I could die right now. My friend's dad swooped in on his jet ski and saved me. That's scary. Back in university I went to the restroom. When I came out there was this guy I'd never seen before waiting in the hall by the women's restroom. He started talking to me as if he knew me and kept asking for help on a specific assignment. I kept telling him that I wasn't in that class while trying to get away. Every time I took a step to the side to walk past him he would block me and walk towards me, cornering me back into the bathroom with every step. Even though it was broad daylight, I was terrified and I could tell by his demeanor that something wasn't right. My back was to the bathroom door when he began to pull something out of his backpack. I never saw what it was because at that very moment another guy walked past and asked if everything was alright and the first guy left very quickly. What the frick? When I was about to have a shower and looked in the mirror then I saw that absolute massive huntsman in the reflection. Like so big I could see each of its eyes from decently far away. Despite knowing they're harmless, I'm still absolutely terrified of huntsmen. Having my house sprayed for pests annually is the best money I spend each autumn. I lived about 5 blocks from my job, espresso stand barista, and was walking to work one morning about 8:30ish along a really busy street. There was a jack-in-the-box kitty corner from the espresso stand and as I was walking past the parking lot a guy in a 70s muscle car stopped me to ask if I knew where thus and such high school was. I told him it was on the other side of town but he insisted there was one right in the neighborhood where we were. There was a private school a few blocks away but it wasn't a high school. As I was talking to him his passenger had gotten out and walked around on the sidewalk so he was behind me. I gave them directions to the private school. Literally go down this road 3 blocks. Turn left at the brown duplex with the pine trees in the front yard. Drive 2 more blocks and you're in the parking lot. But they were just certain they'd get lost. They really wanted me to get in the car and go with them. Every hair on the back of my neck was at attention. I told them my boss was waiting for me and pointed to where not just my boss stood but a bunch of the larger guys from the car detailing windshield installation strip mall were keeping an eye on the situation. I shook as I crossed that street. A couple of the big windshield dudes crossed to meet me and the guys in the car took off. I'm glad the men at the shop were aware and got involved to make sure you got to work safely. A customer asked me out. I said no, and he left the store very upset. Any woman who works in retail has had this experience. Sadly this is nothing unusual. But then he waited by the front door, the only exit, occasionally looking in at me through the glass windows. 45 minutes later, he was still there. I was the only one on the floor that night, so he knew I had to close the store alone. I had to call the manager to come in and help me close. While I was waiting for the manager, I started to second guess myself. Maybe he was just waiting for a ride. But as soon as my manager arrived, the customer got into his parked car and left. Chilling. You just don't know what might have happened. Glad you played it safe. Going into hospital with a terrible headache and learning I had a cancerous tumor in the middle of my chest. It was blocking the superior vena cava, hence the headache. I knew there was something wrong but I never thought it would be that. It's a long time ago. I'm grand now. Thanks. Good. Watching my brother nearly die from anaphylactic shock when I was 6. He was only 18 months old. I was out with my mom when the person who was watching him called us to tell us that he had a rash and to come home immediately. We got home, and I still remember being absolutely horrified at how he looked. He was covered in hives and his eyes were swollen shut. I had to sit in the back seat with him on the way to the hospital. I remember not being able to look at him because it scared me too much. By the time we pulled up to the he was making these weird noises. His throat was nearly closed, and a nurse grabbed him out of my mom's arms, called a code blue, and rushed him into a room. I was outside the room watching doctors rush in. All I heard were monitors and yelling, so I assumed that he had just died. That was quite honestly the worst feeling that I've ever felt. I couldn't do anything but sit in a chair and cry and shake. A nurse came out after they stabilized him enough to know that he was going to survive and pointed out that he was crying. She held my hand and gave me a popsicle and told me that as long as he was crying then he was okay. He's 12 now, I'm 18, and I will forever have PTSD from that. Just typing this made me shake. I can't watch movies or shows with allergic reaction scenes or jokes. I can't even read books like that. I couldn't get through the beginning of One of Us is Lying because of the reaction. He's still allergic to peanuts like so many other kids. It makes me mad when people make jokes about food allergies, especially because of how deadly they can be. If it's possible, you should really seek therapy. It can help you overcome those horrible memories from your childhood. I'm so sorry you and your family had to go through such a traumatizing event. Some guy in the hotel room next to mine shot himself and the round made it through the wall and into my luggage. Almost getting mugged. Luckily I saw the bastard. I assume he was inexperienced, and turned around while I was a ways from him and outran his sluggish butt when he gave chase. Walked with a screwdriver in my pocket for months after just so I wouldn't be defenseless if he or someone else tried it again. Fell asleep behind the wheel. Car was completely damaged on the driver's side. I had to get out through the passenger side. I was not injured and I still don't know how I survived. I just shared a lesser scary story, but yours reminds me of another similar scary event that happened to me. I'm pretty sure I fell asleep at the wheel during a long night drive, hit the median and flew off the road. I totaled my car but walked away with a few bruises. I swear I had PTSD for a while after that accident. I got extremely lucky, nobody including myself was hurt. In college one weekend, I crashed at a friend's house and woke up early in the morning, 7 AM or so. I decided to walk 5 minutes back to my dorm to get some more sleep in my own bed. As I got close to my dorm, I noticed a man following me. No one else is out walking. He doesn't look college age either. I start fast walking to the front door. It was after the night security guard, aka paid students, left, so there was no one at the door. I still had to swipe my aid card to get in and he was very close behind me. I swipe my card and he sneaks in before the door fully closed and relocked. I bolted up the one flight of stairs to my floor and down a 80-foot hallway to my room. As I fumbled with my keys I saw the man enter the walkway, looking left and right to see where I went. I slipped in my room and locked my door. I didn't fall back asleep that morning. Not as scary as the other ones, but here's mine. I was 11. My friends were 12, 10 and 12. We were walking around the neighborhood while having a sleepover at my friend's house. At 3 AM and this drunk guy started chasing us halfway down the street shouting at us. We lost him by running around a servo and running past our school. I currently have a baseball-sized tumor in my liver that I found out about right before Thanksgiving and have a biopsy next week. I'm only 35 and so this has been scary. I'll likely have a large chunk of liver and tumor removed shortly, even though they think it is benign. It's been a scary month or so. Really makes you think about life. Hope that everything turns out well. Heart rate regularly went up to 220-240 BPM out of nowhere. Could go on for an hour and a half. Scariest part was the run of skipped beats that initiated this fast heartbeat. Got more or less used to it, but after getting it in a plane when flying to a place in the middle of nowhere, I started to worry again and decided it was time to get an ablation. I still have the occasional run of skipped beats. Still scary, but no extremely high heart rate anymore. Would recommend an ablation if having similar issues. I've had 9 ablations. LOL. And yes, I completely agree with you. Scary dang stuff. Growing up I lived 1 block away from a street specifically for the elderly with an elderly home right across the street from it. I remember when I was in 6th grade I was walking home with my sister and as we were about to cross the sidewalk, this couple stopped their car right on the sidewalk and just stared at me blankly for a solid 30 seconds, without blinking or any movement whatsoever before driving off. I have no clue why they stared at me, but it scared the crap out of me. Reminds me of the movie The Visit. I went out for a few drinks with friends one Saturday night, left the bar and went back to my apartment where I live alone. I got into bed and fell asleep. The next morning my friend sent me a message on WhatsApp saying send me the photos from last night, so I flicked through all of the photos from the night before to find at least 20 pictures of me sleeping, and in the background of the photo the shadow of someone on the wall, clearly holding up my phone, taking pictures all dated and timed during the time I would have been asleep. My dad kidnapped me and my brothers when I was 10 or 11. He has a manic depressive disorder. He seemed normal when he picked us up from mom's house on Friday, but very quickly we realized he was manic. He got rid of every phone in the house before we arrived, so we had no way to call for help, and this was before cell phones. Sadly, we were good at managing irrational adults by that age, so we managed to survive most of the weekend unscathed, except my older brother was beat very badly on Saturday morning. On Sunday, he loaded us in the car to take us home. He then proceeded to race through the city, out to the country, and up and down highways and country roads for 15 hours. We were supposed to be home at mom's by 11 AM on Sunday. He kept us until about 3 AM Monday morning. Intermittently he would pull his truck over and ask us to do random tasks like hand him a hanger, or give directions, or tune the radio. If one of us failed to do it to his satisfaction, he would make us all run around the truck until he allowed us back in. He was also having auditory hallucinations that led him to accuse us of saying disrespectful things, changing the radio station, etc. Sometimes he would get out of the truck, stand in front of it, pray for a long time, then raise his hands to praise God and spin. I tried to get help when he stopped at a gas station once, but was too afraid of the punishment if dad caught me. My dad picked us up at 5 PM on Friday, and returned us at 3 AM Monday morning. He did not feed us the entire time. Mom spent her night calling the police begging them to look for us, and they kept saying it hadn't been long enough. She had seen a movie in which a mother and stepfather blew up the kids rather than return them to the stable parent, and it really affected her. Also, my dad had knives and guns and was known to be a violent drunk. When we finally arrived home we collapsed as soon as the door closed behind us. All three of us crumpled to the ground in relief and exhaustion. It has been nearly 20 years and I still tense and shake when I think about it. So your mother knew that your father had these episodes and the police fobbed her off. Helpful. I'm glad you're all okay. Well, you know what I mean. Stuck in a riptide for about 70 minutes before a helicopter picked me up in a basket. My little brother wasn't as fortunate. Swim parallel to the shore to escape a riptide. Y'all. I am so sorry. My GP cut open an abscess in my groin area to release pressure, put some bandage on it and sent me home. On the way home I noticed I was leaking down there and I was in a lot of pain. Way more than the previous time I had it done. Got out of the car crying from the pain and noticed the seat was all blood. Turns out my GP hit an artery and I was bleeding out. My mom drove me to the hospital and I truly felt like I was dying, fighting to stay awake. That's gonna stick with me for a while. I hope you change GPs. Christ. Posted this before, but I was staying in a hotel by myself and decided to watch The Exorcism of Emily Rose. Bad decision. Some butthole had played the Crowless Hotel prank, and they had set the alarm clock radio to go off on full volume to a Gregorian chant channel aka Catholic monk music at 4 AM. I've never moved so fast in my life. Jumped halfway across the room trying to figure out what was happening. Did not get back to sleep that night and have checked every hotel alarm since. I've also read that the actresses in that movie had some messed up things happen with radios during filming. What a weird coincidence. The mountain the boarding school I attended caught on fire. I will never forget the looking over the balcony of the dining hall to a huge smoke cloud that was pouring through the sky. Turned it all red. Ash was falling from the sky as we all walked into town as a big long line. The younger kids were evacuated by bus off the mountain, but older kids were told to get into people's cars. Everyone frantically getting into random cars and driving down the burning mountain. I used to live on the 5th floor in an old downtown apartment building, and the elevators were always breaking down. Maintenance workers would stick signs made of notebook paper up to let people know to take the stairs instead. Well, one day, maybe after 2 weeks of taking the stairs, the sign on the elevator was gone, so I assumed it was safe to take the elevator again. I got inside with a guy who lived on the floor below me, and the car seemed to be working just fine. The elevator stopped on the 4th floor to let the guy off. As soon as the doors closed again, the entire elevator started shaking violently. I started to frantically press random buttons, thinking I'm about to die, and after a terrifying minute of shaking, the doors opened on the 5th floor, and I rushed out. Turns out the sign had fallen off, and the elevator was not safe to ride after all. After that, I happily took the stairs every day for the next month until my lease was up, and then moved. My grandma has a summer beach house and you can only get there by boat. One time, we took the boat to go to the house, but the boat straight up stopped working right next to some very sharp looking rocks, and after it, a small but pretty scary waterfall. So, the boat is freaking dead, it won't do crap, and the boat starts moving toward the super sharp rocks followed by the waterfall. So we're all scared as frick at this point, and my dad is desperately trying to get this thing to work. And then the boat engine starts working again and we finally get the heck out of there. I actually thought we were going to die. Hit a mine in the Gulf at around 3 AM and in bed. It came off the ship 4 times from bow to aft and eventually got dragged into the propellers, which put a big crease in the mine. Our mess on the ship was above the propellers and we'd heard it getting closer as it slammed off the side of the ship. Luckily it was a dud and was picked up by the Americans. In the time of first hearing it hit the front of the ship to eventually being spat out must have been 30 seconds or so. Totally aware of not being able to scream or speak. Absolutely frozen and literally pee myself and didn't know until it was over and I wasn't the only one. The Americans offered it to us as a souvenir but it was politely declined. First Gulf 90. A bit over a week ago I found a kid in his car who had shot himself in the head about 2 minutes prior. I watched him die and cried and couldn't do much. I've since gotten therapy but he's in my thoughts all the time now. That is terrible. I'm so sorry you had to see that. I live in Australia and I've told this story before. The pathway I take to get home has a little dirt trail that the bikes make as they go through and I take it as a shortcut. One day I'm walking home and I'm in a rush. I'm speed walking through the path, Freddie Mercury blasting through my headphones, and only when the music stops to play the next song, I hear a rustling from a bush. I look down and there's a freaking king brown snake going past me. Just Australian things. I have a few, but I will share a time I believed my life was in danger. My sister was a live-in nanny for a wealthy couple in an upscale suburb. She got kidney stones and asked if I could cover for her because I had experience with babysitting and I could stay with her when she was sick. I went to help. These people were really out there, but it was only for a few days. The mother went to a concert with her girlfriend that night. The father didn't live there because they were separated. I had literally just met them. There was a 7-year-old boy and twin 4-year-olds, a boy and a girl. These poor kids had issues because a lot was going on. They were in bed and my sister and I were in her room watching TV when we heard a loud noise coming from downstairs. We go to check things out and my sister found that a big piece of wood that blocked the basement door had been pushed in. We have the lights on, doors locked and we call the police. The 7-year-old heard the noise and he was scared. I told my sister to take him upstairs and I would wait for the police. I grabbed a knife for the block and I waited downstairs alone for the police to show up. It took about 10 minutes, but it felt like forever. I am not a violent person, but all I could think was that there were innocent kids upstairs and if someone attacked I needed to protect them. The police told us they didn't find anything and left. We couldn't get a hold of either parent this whole time. The next day, I was playing with the kids in the yard. I was pushing the twins on the swings when the 7-year-old said he found something cool and wanted to show me. It was a knife. I asked him if I could please see it. I didn't want to scare him. I take it inside and call the police. Unfortunately, I had to touch it to get it away from the kid. It wasn't a small knife and it was by the entrance to the basement. They never found the person. I just got goosebumps from reading that. Born with a heart condition, had to go to Seattle once a year for a checkup. I was 9-12 this time. Parents parked in a different area of the parking lot. Didn't think anything of it. Then they led me to the surgery elevators. They must be mistaken, but I don't want to be rude so I don't say anything. Proceed to surgery check-in, get called back, handed plastic shot glass of pink syrup like liquid. No one said anything to me on the 5-hour drive over about this. I still have trust issues, and I'm still mad about this. Volunteered in Rwanda in '97. Driving back alone to my project area. Drove through a heavily forested area around noon. Found out later in the day that the local governor got killed in an ambush in that same area. 12 killed. 2 vehicles burned. He'd passed through about an hour after I went through. Kid got hit by a car in the street outside my house. I was shaking so bad that it took me forever to call 911. Thankfully, he turned out okay. Losing brakes on a mountain road was pretty wild. So was losing my young daughter in the grocery store. All these things have been brief. Thank heavens. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.